A very good morning to all and welcome to the new class. So today we are going to discuss about crops. We are going to discuss about crops, agriculture and storage of crops. So before that, do you all remember what we have learnt in the last class? We learnt about vegetative reproduction, right? So moving on to today's topic. So first of all, let me ask you, so do we all need food? Yes, food is very, very important to us, right? It is important for our survival. So we cannot live without food. We cannot even think without having food, right? Because it is very, very important for our survival. And where do we get this food from? Where do we get it? From the crops. So what are crops? Plants of one kind grown in a particular area or region during a particular period are called crops. So crops are plants that are grown in large scale only for the purpose of agriculture. We call it as crops. And do you know who grow crops? It is the farmer. Who grow crops? Farmer grow crops. The farmer grow different kinds of crops in different seasons. So the growth of a crop depends on the availability of water, depends on the fertility of soil and other favorable conditions. So who grow crops? It is the farmer. And the farmer grow crops depending on the availability of water, then depending on the climatic condition and fertility of soil. All these are very, very important for the growth of a plant. For example, let's take the example of a paddy plant from which we get rice. So these plants grow well. These plants need good amount of rainfall. And do you know where do they grow? They grow in warm coastal regions. Let's take the example of ragi. These crops requires little rainfall and they grow in drier regions. So for the growth of a crop, it depends on the fertility of soil, depends on the availability of water and other climatic conditions. So based on season, we can classify crops as two. Do you know which are they? They are kharif and rabi. Kharif crops and rabi crops. So based on season, we can classify crops as kharif crops and rabi crops. So let's see the first one, that is kharif crops. So what are kharif crops? Crops that are sown in monsoon season. What do we call? We call it as kharif crops because these crops are grown in which season? In monsoon season, that is in rainy season. So these crops are sown in the beginning of June. And do you know when they are harvested? They are harvested in September, October. So the crops that are sown in monsoon season, what do we call it? We call it as kharif crops. And these crops are sown in the beginning of June. And they are harvested in September, October. For example, paddy, maize, all these are examples for kharif crops. And these crops requires good amount of rainfall. And these crops are sown in which season? In monsoon season. What about the next type? It is the rabi crops. So, crops that are sown in winter season. What do we call? We call it as rabi crops. So, these crops are called as winter crops. And do you know when they are sown? They are sown in the mid of November, which is after monsoon. And do you know when they are harvested? They are harvested in April-May month. So that is about rabi crops. So crops that are sown in winter season, what do we call? We call it as rabi crops. So we discussed about crops based on seasons. So we learnt who grow crops? It is the farmer. So what is the occupation of the farmer? It is agriculture. So agriculture is one of the most important occupation in India. So what is agriculture? Agriculture is the science. It is the science of growing crops. The practice of growing plants on a large scale is called agriculture. So, the farmer does agriculture. And what is agriculture? It is the science of growing crops. The plants that are grown in large scale, we call it as agriculture. So, now let's see the different steps that is required for the growth of a healthy crop. So, let's discuss the steps one by one. The first one is prepare the soil properly. So, for the proper growth of a crop, the first and foremost step is prepare the soil properly. So, for that is ploughing the field. So, ploughing helps to prepare and loosen the soil. So, the ploughing can be done manually or it can be done with the help of farmers. It can be done with the help of animals. So, before ploughing, we need to add manure. We need to add manure in the field. So, what happens is the manure gets mixed with the soil and it adds fertility to the soil. So, plants grow well in fertile soil. So, what is the first step? The first step is prepare the soil properly. It helps to loosen the soil. Ploughing the field helps to prepare and loosen the soil. So, that is the first and foremost step. Then, what is the next step? Use healthy and ripe seeds for sowing. So, the next step is sowing seeds. So, a seed gives rise to a new plant, right? For that, we need to use good quality seeds. So, the next step is sowing. For that, we need to use good quality seeds. Then, what is the next step? Irrigate the crops at regular intervals. Do crops need water? Yes, right. Plants need water to grow. So, you have to water these plants at regular intervals that helps them to grow. So, that is the third step. What comes next? The next is remove weeds that grow in the field. So, what is the meaning of weed? That means the wild plants. So, we need to remove the wild plants that grow in the field. Why? Because they are harmful to the surrounding plants. So, we need to remove those weeds in the field. Coming to the next is, what is the next step? Use insecticides and pesticides. So, we need to spray these chemicals. Why do we do so? We need to spray these chemicals in order to destroy the pest, in order to destroy the plant pest. So, certain insects and fungi that destroy plants, we call it as plant pest. So, we spray these chemicals in order to destroy, in order to remove these plant pest. See the next step. Protect the crop from grazing animals. Cattle, sheep, all these are examples for grazing animals. And we need to protect these crops from grazing animals. Why? Because these animals will damage the crops by feeding on them. So, we need to protect these crops from grazing animals. Then, the next step. Harvest and store safely till the produce is sold in the market. The most important step and the last step, that is harvesting. So, first ploughing the field, then we sow the seeds, then we water the plant, then comes harvesting. When the crops are ripe, the harvesting is done. So, we harvest the crops and then we keep the crops safely till they are sold in the market. So, these are some of the important steps required for the growth of a healthy crop. Now, let's discuss about storage of harvested crop. So, we learnt about harvesting. So, where do we keep these harvested crops? Is it possible for us to sell the whole produce after harvesting? It is not possible. It is not possible for us to sell the entire produce after harvesting. For that, we need to store them safely because different kinds of crops requires different storage facilities. So, it is very, very important to store them properly. For example, fruits and vegetables. We need to store them in cold storage. What about these grains and pulses? We store them in the granaries. So you can see the picture here. So the grains and pulses are stored in a storehouse, which we call it as the granaries. So storage facility is very, very important. It is not possible for us to sell the entire produce as soon as the crop is harvested. So it is very, very important for us to store it properly. And different crops requires different storage facilities. So that is about storage of harvested crops. So I hope you all understood the topic crops, and we discussed about how we can grow a healthy and new crop, the steps required. Then we learned about the storage of harvested crops. So we are done with the chapter. So before that, let's discuss about the great scientist M.S. Swaminathan. He was honored as the father of Green Revolution, and at the same time, he is known for the pioneering work on high-yield varieties of rice and wheat seeds. So that is about M.S. Swaminathan. So we are done with the chapter. So you all can go through the exercise and try to complete these exercises. And in page number 15, you have an activity, that is activity zone and project zone. So you can try doing any one activity and record your observations. So we are done with the chapter number 1, plant reproduction. So you can just go through the textbook, read it, and try to do all the exercises and activities. So we'll meet in the next class and we'll start a new chapter. Till then, thank you.